It's been about a week now, and I figured this would be enough time to settle back into a normal life and gather my thoughts about the 2025 CONCACAF Gold Cup. I'm Tristan Folks, and as you know, I was traveling as I was following the Canada men's national team until they were upset by Guatemala in the quarterfinals, which ended up seeing me use my backup plans to go to Washington, D.C. and Chicago, respectively, for other things. Obviously, I did not disappear because I've still been posting and going to stuff. And to be honest about this tournament, it was really competitive and just way more than I expected. So it was like really fun to watch this in general. So I hope a lot of you felt the same. It just really depends what your eyes are on since the FIFA Club World Cup is going on as well. So hopefully you got a chance to watch the Gold Cup because it was fascinating. In this video, I'm going to review how these groups finish, followed by the knockout stage, and then I'll give you my thoughts on all of that. Afterwards, we'll give each nation a report card, and then I'll give you my thoughts on each country as we do that report card, how they did throughout the Gold Cup, and my thoughts on that. And then lastly, we'll look at the awards, and we'll discuss a little about them, so it should be a fun one. So let's get started. Starting off with Group A. Overall, I'm not shocked how this group finished. I thought Mexico wasn't at their best, and as they improved, Costa Rica did as well. The Dominican Republic honestly showed out and did not come into the tournament at 100%, so shout out to them. Suriname had opportunities to come away with more than one draw, but it just did not happen that way. In Group B, Canada made winning this group more difficult than it had to be in my opinion. Honduras was able to finish strong after dealing with adversity, with the top two going as expected. Curacao still surprised me in how they played, even though I knew they were coming to this tournament strong. But they showed out and just couldn't get another result at the end. And then El Salvador, on the other hand, did not have many opportunities when it came to scoring, and they paid the price for it. The group overall finished as expected. Looking at Group C, it was no shock Panama topped this group. Guatemala, on the other hand, took advantage of a lackluster Jamaica, who looked dreadful, and Guatemala maximized in these matches. Guadeloupe finishing on the bottom is not a surprise, but they did get better match by match slightly. Lastly, in Group D, the USA started off strong, and it felt they were slowly fading a little match by match, but it's not like that mattered ultimately in the group stage. Saudi Arabia, coming in as a guest with a handful of missing players, did fairly well, but they also weren't the greatest. Trinidad and Tobago got better throughout the tournament, and then Haiti kept it close in matches, but they weren't the better side at all, respectfully. So that's how the group stage ended up finishing ultimately. I was not really too far off, if I had to be honest. So next up, we're going to move on to the knockout stage, and we're going to get into the quarterfinals because, oh boy, did it get crazy in this one. So let's hop right into the bracket. The first match we'll go over is Panama against Honduras. Panama continued to show out in this tournament, and then just suddenly Honduras got a late goal. They ended up stealing this one in PKs, and it was very unexpected, and it felt it happened in a snap of a finger, and the dynamic completely changed as Panama seemed to also lay back a little, and this result definitely caught them by surprise. The next match features Mexico against Saudi Arabia. This match took Mexico time to break through against Saudi Arabia, but they got rolling out of the second half and honestly never looked back to move on. The match between Canada and Guatemala, Canada ends up getting upset by Guatemala, which they can only blame themselves ultimately. They were dominating them in the first half, and the red card changed everything, minus the quality on the pitch. Guatemala got in between the lines at one point, and they ended up succeeding on PKs. The last match of the quarterfinals featured the USA and Costa Rica, and this match saw quite a lot of action. We saw Costa Rica draw a PK early on, and the US came back with a couple of goals after a slow start for the first 40 minutes. And it looked like they would win this one until Costa Rica scored a beautiful goal, and this also saw PKs. I thought Navis was going to win this in a goalkeeper battle, but it turned out going the other way. For the semifinals, we'll look at the first match, which is between the USA and Guatemala. The U.S. got a couple of great goals from Diego Luna, and it took time, but Guatemala ended up getting fully involved in this match, and towards the end, they got their deserved goal, but just couldn't find a way to get it tied up. On the other side, you have Mexico against Honduras, where Mexico saw their very own Raul Jimenez come out blazing in the second half after a lackluster first half, which seems to be a common theme. Honduras played fairly well in my opinion, but just could not produce a lot offensively to find an equalizer. And then in the final between Mexico, USA, not a shocker, but the US got this goal really early on, and I wonder how Mexico would answer, because it felt like they were being put to the test. They couldn't just score a goal and sit a little more back tactically anymore in this situation like they have plenty of times. So they end up calling on their leaders with Jimenez scoring a goal, and Mexico got better and better, and then we saw Edson Alvarez be the one to deliver and help win back-to-back titles for Mexico. We're going to get into the report cards. So we're going to go from 16th to 1st, and then this is going to be based on the final standings for the tournament, which accounts for total points. And then if needed, we'll go to goal differential for those tied. And then just based on how the knockouts finish with those two things I said before, playing a count in determining everything in the order. These ratings are also respectfully my own. Starting on the bottom in 16th, we have Guadeloupe. I will be giving them a D. Guadeloupe did not look as strong in any of their matches overall compared to the last running of the tournament. They could score goals, but they leaked a lot in my opinion in their back line, and they ended up conceding 10 times, and that just won't do it. They got quality up front, but it really diminishes very quickly if you start looking back. In 15th, we have Haiti. I'll be giving them a D+. They ended up competing in all of their matches. I would also say they costed themselves some results, whether it's conceding PKs, not scoring PKs, being undisciplined, or just not being strong in general. Ahead of their 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers, they'll need to clean things up as they'll go up against better oppositions. And 14th, we have El Salvador, who will be getting a D- from me. When you only get 2 shots on target, I'm not too sure how you expect to find a way to win. And it seems once they moved into the attacking third, things became very difficult for them. They didn't play horribly, but each match they showed a new weakness in my opinion. I don't see them doing well in their upcoming 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers. In 13th, we have Suriname, and I will be giving them a C-. I do believe Suriname could have done better. They started slow in their first match, they ended up getting the lead, and then they ended up finding a way to lose. They then went up against a tough Mexico side, yet they showed a lot of potential in that match. And then when it came to that final match, they couldn't find a goal with a man advantage for well over an hour of play. A lot of things just need to be forgotten from this tournament, and they need to move on to the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers. In 12th, we had the Dominican Republic, who made their debut this year, and I was impressed. So they are getting a B- actually. I wasn't too sure what they were going to bring. Missing Junior Firpo was a massive loss for them because they ended up playing solid against Mexico. They lost late against Costa Rica, and they held Suriname off while they were down a man. This is something to build on for this program in the future, as that's what they'll look to do, and they performed pretty well for their first time being in this tournament, so nice job, DR. In 11th, we have Trinidad and Tobago. I will be giving them a C-. Trinidad and Tobago did not show up in their first match whatsoever. In their second match against Haiti, they got away with some things, honestly, and they managed to pull off a draw, and then they improved with a decent match against Saudi Arabia. But I expected more from this side overall. In 10th, I have Curacao, and I'll be giving them a B. Going into the next round of the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers, Curacao showed they had the chance to qualify, and they showed to be a threat in this tournament. They outplayed El Salvador, but just couldn't get that goal. They found a draw against Canada, which they played solid as much as Canada was lackluster. And then at the end, they end up just getting heartbroken by Honduras. And in ninth, we have Jamaica. You're getting an F. That was just completely unacceptable at every level possible in my eyes. They got outplayed by Guatemala, and the quality on the pitch did not show the care whatsoever. I saw a lot of jogging, a lot of just players not seeming they cared. And the next match, they were down the Guadeloupe, and they managed to find 2 goals, and then they were lackluster again. And when it came to the last group stage match, when it truly mattered, Panama smoked them. I was not impressed with about anyone. If you want to leave a guaranteed spot for the 2026 World Cup wide open to the likes of Curacao, they're in the same group, by the way. Keep playing this way, and it'll probably turn out this way. Alright, now we're going to move on to teams that were knocked out in the quarterfinals, beginning with 8th. We have Saudi Arabia, and for me, I'm going to give them a C+. I expected more from Saudi Arabia, and I understand they were missing a handful of players from this year's FIFA Club World Cup. They ended up sneaking away with the win against Haiti. They had a good match with the USA, and then they struggled to an extent against Trinidad and Tobago. And then going into the knockouts, their matchup wasn't favorable whatsoever, and they didn't show too much either. So they'll end up moving on to the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers in the AFC, respectively. Moving on to 7th, we have Costa Rica, and I'm going to give them a B+. Costa Rica has a new manager, which is Miguel Herrera. They had some moments in their first match, but they ended up winning that. They overcame the Dominican Republic, and they held Mexico to a draw with a lot of credit to Keylor Navas, and it won't be the last time I mention his name. In the knockouts, they lost to the U.S. in PKs, and I thought they'd do better, but they almost pulled off the upset, so I'm still very impressed. Moving on to 6th, we have Canada, and they're going to be getting a C in my books. So in the first match, Canada absolutely smoked Honduras, and then it honestly just went down from here. They had plenty of bad moments against Curacao, which saw them draw ultimately. In the last group stage match against El Salvador, it was a matter of 2 red cards. Ultimately, they find a way to score a couple of goals, and there was a PK miss in that match as well. To get knocked out how they did by Guatemala from 1, the red card, the 2, even just having quality players over Guatemala, that can't just ever happen. I'm sorry. But in PKs, I also believe they could have been a little better as well. In 5th, we have Panama. And they were looking great, but now it's just a B. It was really looking fantastic for them for the entire tournament, and then suddenly they lost in PKs to Honduras after conceding a late goal. They showed excellence, and then it seemed they got too comfortable and sat back, and they paid the price for it. This will be a lesson learned for them. In 4th, which are teams that are getting knocked out in the semifinals, we have Honduras. And for me, I don't know if this is harsh, but I'm going to give them a C+. Honduras, as mentioned, ended up getting smacked by Canada. And then when it came to that derby match against El Salvador, they ended up finding their way to win, which I was impressed with the response being there. And then to guarantee their spot into the knockouts, they found a late goal against Curacao, and they show they can battle through adversity, which is a big thing. In the quarterfinals against Panama, they ended up going down a goal, but they didn't quit, and they found that goal, and ultimately won in PKs. Their mentality changed, and they appeared as fighters in my opinion, but they just could not outdo Mexico. In 3rd, we have Guatemala, and you're going to get an A. I don't really know what else you could have really asked for if you're Guatemala, realistically. They ended up getting a nice win over Jamaica. They ended up suffering a tough loss to Panama, where they fought really hard in that match. And then they went on a decent scoring spree against Guadeloupe to finish 2nd in the group. They took advantage of a red card from Canada in the quarterfinals and took advantage of a moment from their back line and were able to get a goal and come out on the right side of them. Going into the semifinals, they truly got outdone by one player, as in Diego Luna, early on, but they showed that fight, they got a goal at the end, and they maximized throughout this tournament, and should leave with no regrets. In second, the team that essentially lost to first, we have the USA. I'll be giving them a B+. The USA started off on the front foot in this tournament after 2 ugly losses in friendlies. They seemed to lay off a little more in the other 2 matches to an extent, and when it came to the knockouts, they almost managed to get upset, but Matt Freese, their goalkeeper, ended up dueling out Keylor Navas and PK, surprisingly. And going to the semifinals, they did have a slow start against Guatemala, and you can thank Diego Luna for that. And then they ended up having some moments where it really could have got really dangerous for them, but they make it to the final. In the final, they got a solid set piece early on, and I was curious how they carry on the remainder of the match, but Mexico ends up finding those 2 goals. They end up winning ultimately, and USA just could not get it done at the end there, but a lot of players developed and learned, so that's a good sign for them. And in the first, we got Mexico. Mexico was my pick as mentioned, and they ended up getting it done. In their first 2 group stage matches, they weren't at their best, and then it felt in the last 4 matches they were the best and relentless. They had that draw against Costa Rica that argued they deserved the win. They beat Saudi Arabia, followed by Honduras. I'm impressed with their come-from-behind win against the USA, even though they weren't even down for half an hour. And I felt I saw a lot of leaders on the pitch, and I like how the tactics are ran over there. I feel they're not like dominant, but they know how to win, and they know how to defend the win. So it's a really good recipe they got going. Lastly, we'll look into the awards from CONCACAF for the tournament. I'll share a brief summary of each one, and I'll share my thought. For the Golden Ball, which is the best player of the tournament, that ends up going to Edson Alvarez. And Alvarez was a complete menace in this tournament. He was absolutely fantastic on set pieces. That was a big thing. And it was truly incredible, as he was the true difference maker in the midfield, and he has height too. He's already a legend who's just building his legacy right now. For the Golden Boot, that ends up going to Ismael Diaz of Panama. This player is definitely in his prime right now. He almost scored half his international goals in this tournament. It will be something he probably never forgets. It feels like Panama now has built a goal scorer that they can rely on for sure. For our Golden Glove, the best goalkeeper, that ends up going to Luis Malagón. It felt whenever Mexico did get in trouble, it was Malagón to the rescue. I'm sure he's learned plenty more with Chola in the camp, and when it truly mattered, he made the saves. He is the goalkeeper of the foreseeable future for Mexico, even though they do have goalkeepers that are younger than him that are on the rise right now. And for our Young Player Award, that ends up going to Ogier Escobar. Well, he plays for CF Montreal. I'm sure you can see what kit I'm wearing. It's not a player I will like respectfully, but he was a big-time player for Guatemala. He ended up finding his first international goal, and it felt like things were just sailing for him as a player once he got that goal. He is only 18 years old and has the opportunity to become a legendary player for the national team. Hopefully CF Montreal sells him as soon as possible, or I will probably have even more nightmares than I already did from seeing him play in Houston and Minneapolis, knowing what club he plays for. But all seriousness, he's a very good player and could be a big part of helping Guatemala get to the 2026 FIFA World Cup if they continue to do what they do and he plays his role. I'm just not really looking forward to seeing him in the next Derby matchup, in the ones in the future if he's there, but hopefully not. For the Fair Play Trophy, it's going to the USA. I don't really have too much to say about this, but you know, they stayed out of trouble pretty much the whole time. And when you have this much quality, I feel it's simpler to be disciplined than it's not to be disciplined. It also shows the young players that they brought in have some discipline, so good award. You won something. So lastly, we'll also look at what CONCACAF decided as the best 11. So in goalkeeper, we have Luis Malagón, who ended up getting the Golden Glove. And then we have Johan Vasquez, Cesar Montes, and then Chris Richards which is my favorite U.S. player, honestly. And then in the midfield, we have Diego Luna, Tillman, two guys who will probably be with the USA in the World Cup, Edson Alvarez, Oscar Santos of Guatemala, and then we see Peter Gonzalez of the Dominican Republic. He plays in La Liga. And then up top, we have Raul Jimenez and Ismael Diaz. So it's kind of shocked to see Santos there. Gonzalez is a really good player. It's cool to see a couple of these names on there. Alright, that is all I got, so I will be wrapping up this 2025 CONCACAF Gold Cup. It was a privilege to see 6 matches and even explore new places, and if you haven't checked out any of the match day vlog videos, I definitely recommend you do that. And we'll see what the next few months bring on this channel. So I'm looking forward to getting some more soccer football content, and I am just currently brainstorming. So I'm looking forward to sharing whatever I come up with. So other than that, I just want to say thanks for watching and thanks for the support, and I hope to see you soon, and God bless. Take care.